All right, let's jump right in. We're about to explore this really incredible story that comes from a deep dive into one single family in pre-war Greece. And what's so cool about this is how their story, just one family's story, can open up a window to a whole world that's, well, it's completely gone now.
You know, when you think about Greek history, your mind probably jumps to the big stuff, right? Epic myths, huge battles. But the real story, the day-to-day history, is often a lot quieter. It's hidden in the lives of everyday families. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to step into that lost world, all through the eyes of four brothers from this rugged Ionian island called Lefkada.
Okay, so first things first, let's meet the brothers who are at the very center of this whole story.
So, there were four of them. First up, you have Evstathios.
Then there was Angeles,
His brother, Dionysios. And finally, John Phaetoros. These four guys, their lives together on this island give us this amazing snapshot of a world that doesn't exist anymore. But it's their story of being torn apart that really tells us about what was happening to their entire country. So picture this. Their world was this one little corner of Greece, southern Lefkada. Think historic villages like Dragonino and Efkidos, a really rugged farming landscape. This was a super close-knit community. We're talking late 19th, early 20th century. So yeah, big changes were happening in Greece as a whole, but out here on the island, life still kind of moved to its own ancient, steady beat. So, to really get who these brothers were, you have to understand where they came from. And that means we need to talk about their parents, Petros and Theodora, because these two, they were like the two pillars holding up the family, and they really represented two huge but totally different forces in their society. And this is what I find so fascinating. Look at the dynamic here. You've got a family that's grounded in two worlds at once, the land and the mind. You've got their dad, Petros, who's all about the earth, his hands in the soil. And then you have their mom, Theodora, who comes from this legacy of learning and, a higher social class. It's this incredible mix. And it was kind of the story of Greece at the time, this push and pull between old agrarian traditions and the new world of education and government. And let's be super clear about their father, Petros. He wasn't just a farmer in the way we might think of one. The sources call him an agrarian manager, which is a fancy way of saying he was a serious businessman. He was running a whole agricultural enterprise, producing top-notch olive oil and wine that was getting exported to major European hubs. We're talking places like Trieste and Vienna, so he was a real player in the island's economy. Now, on the other side of the coin, you have their mother, Theodora. She was from the Maniaki/De La Porta family, and that name meant something. They were part of the island's upper crust, you could say, really influential in things like education and local government. In fact, we know one of her relatives was a daskalos, a teacher, right there in their region. It just goes to show you how in their world, land, money, and education were all tangled up together. Okay, so you have this mix of farming know-how and book smarts. How did that actually shape the four brothers as they were growing up? What did that world look like for them? Well, you have to remember the time period. The brothers were going to school when there was this massive push to create a single, unified Greek identity. I mean, after centuries of being ruled by others, the goal was to bind the nation together with a common story, a common history. And you can bet that spirit was all over their classrooms. And their education wasn't just what they got in a schoolhouse. It was this mix of formal and informal learning. So yeah, they went to local schools, and it's possible they even moved to the main town for more advanced studies. But just as important, if not more so, was everything they learned just by being part of their community. Hearing stories from the village elders, talking to the local priests, listening to traveling merchants who brought news from far-off places, that was a huge part of their education too. But this whole world they grew up in, this world of family tradition, of growing national pride, all set to the rhythm of the olive and grape harvests, it was all about to be completely shattered. The massive, brutal forces of the 20th century were heading right for them, and they had no idea. And this timeline really just lays it all out. You can see it so clearly. You have this long period of, relative peace and agrarian life. Then you start to see the rise of a modern Greece, but then, boom, all of that gets ripped apart by World War II and then the unbelievably brutal Greek Civil War that came right after. This was the crucible. It was the ultimate test for the Phaetoros family. War became this fire that would basically melt down and reshape everything they ever knew. Their connection to their land, their family's reputation, and maybe most tragically, their connection to each other. And that brings us to the last part of their story together.
It's the most heartbreaking part, really. The source material itself calls it their ultimate tragic dispersal.
So after all that conflict, the four brothers, Evstathios, Angelos, Dionysius, and John, these four boys who grew up side by side on that island, they were just scattered. That tight-knit family, the one built over generations on land and learning, was just gone, broken, forever.
And this right here is the really tough part. This is the key takeaway. The historical record just goes silent. It tells us nothing about what happened to them as individuals. So if you're asking, well, how did each of them die? The hard, honest answer is, we don't know. We just don't know. Their story, which was so clear and rich, just stops. It's this chilling reminder that war doesn't just kill people. It erases their entire stories from history.
When you think about it, the story of the Fataris brothers is like a miniature version of a massive tragedy that happened all over Greece, all over Europe, and it really leaves you with this one heavy question to think about. For every single story like this that we managed to piece together, how many thousands or millions more were just completely lost forever, just scattered by the winds of war?